Well, hello there, students of World War II. Mr. O'Brien here, getting ready for the unit test review. I'm going to try to give you a quick synopsis of this lecture. Please take a look at the Google Slides for more details, but let's hit upon some key notes that will definitely be on the examination. You know, World War I was the second technological war ever fought. The Civil War was the first. The destruction and carnage was unbelievable. Technology, machine guns, poison gas, airplanes, submarines was only the beginning. No one thought that this war would ever last 4 years, and they called it the Great War, but there was nothing great about this war. Well, gentlemen, the checkerboard of Europe is going to be completely changed, and the seeds of World War II will be at a place called Versailles, which is Paris, France, in 1919. But let's get started, shall we? So, on the 11th hour of the 11th day in 1918, the Great War ends. 4 years, 3 months, and 14 days. And let's take another quick look of this map. There's Germany, Austria-Hungary, right before World War I, and looked at all the things that had changed. But because we're going to be talking about Adolf Hitler soon, I want you to take a look at Poland. That's right. They created Poland with a big chunk of German territory. And if that wasn't insulting enough, they took part of Germany called East Prussia, and they decided to divide Germany so that Poland could have access to the water. Seaports, if you will. This is called the Polish Corridor. And later, Adolf Hitler is going to promise that not only will the Polish Corridor be returned to Germany, but if his plans go right, he will have something called Lebensraum, where he'll turn Poland into the breadbasket, the food production center, the farmland that will fuel the Third Reich for what he believed to be 1,000 years. Austria and Hungary were divided now. Yugoslavia comes online, Czechoslovakia comes online, and these are basically the hopes that there can be ethnic, if you will, homelands for all these minority groups that are all through Europe. Men, you could spend an entire chapter talking about the creation of these countries, but this will not go down very well with the German people, and certainly will not go down well with a corporal who fought in the Western Front by the name of Adolf Hitler. Okay. Gentlemen, we're going to see the creation of countries like Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia. Once, when you think about it, men, think about how things changed. Russia, the largest army in World War I, is going to lose not only incredible amounts of casualties, our ally is going to lose his country. Nicholas Romanov will be murdered by the Bolsheviks. You call them communists. His family will be killed in cold blood. And in 1917, Russia will leave the war, allowing Germany, hopefully, to send troops to the Western Front to beat America's entrance into the struggle. You know, men, America came into the fourth quarter of the game in 1917, but it wasn't going to be enough. The Germans from the Eastern Front will not be enough to turn the tide of the Allied victory. America was fresh, and America had brought in a lot of extra supplies. But men, remember one thing, if you will. Remember, Germany was never actually invaded by the Allies. What actually brought them down was not the loss of their country, but the Royal Navy doing its best to blockade and embargo their seaports. When you don't have supplies coming in from your colonies, starvation can become a very powerful weapon, and that's what happened in Germany. Actually, it was starvation and not invasion, which caused the Kaiser to call it quits. Remember, the word Kaiser means king in German, Kaiser Wilhelm, King William, who's going to go into exile. I think he went into the Netherlands. I have to check again. Yes, okay. You know, a lot of people that study World War II in high school forget that Japan was our ally. And some people say that what they contributed to the war factor or the war for the Allies was really not that much. Well, be it as it may, they're going to be rewarded for being our ally. And they're going to be one of the only countries beside America that come out of the First World War better than when they came into it. And they were definitely watching and looking for the territories like the Bismarck Archipelago and other colonies that the Germans had in the Pacific that they hoped to extend their influence over. Yes, you will see the seeds of World War II here in World War I. Yes. Now, gentlemen, later we're going to talk about the idea that the United States was hoping for a fair peace. We're hoping not to have Germany destroyed, dismantled, embarrassed. Not only was it economically sound to keep Germany going, right? But really and truly, we didn't want to make these people have a cause to cause another global conflict. Now, you see this term right here, the Huns? That's not complimentary. That's American propaganda, if you will. We called the Huns because it was referring to the invaders who gave the Romans so much trouble back in the days of the empire. So Hun was a derogatory term. And here's Kaiser Wilhelm before he abdicated and had to go into hiding. Now, poor Germany is going to have the democracy forced upon it with something called the Weimar government. And the Germans are not very good at democracy because they never really have had it. But they're going to have to try to learn in a really quick hurry. Now, guys, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, but I want you to know that the loss of life was tremendous. As we talked about, there were stories that marriage almost went obsolete in England. So many young Englishmen or Tommies between the ages of 18 and 35 were dead, wounded, or psychologically damaged. They called it shell shock. Today we call it post-traumatic stress syndrome, I believe. That no one ever dreamed in their wildest dreams that in one generation there could be another war. It's impossible. All of northwestern France, with its great farmlands and forests, have turned into a wasteland. No more farmlands. In fact, farmers were afraid to plow the fields after World War I because of all the skeletons and bodies they found, if you will, decomposing, and also unexploded ordnance from those gigantic, perfected artillery pieces, which became the signature of the First World War. Okay? Now, you know, it's interesting here. Woodrow Wilson was a bit of an idealist. He was born in the South and actually was around when the Civil War happened, and actually you can remember the impact of the Union's General Sherman's march to the sea. And though he was a Southerner, right, he was kind of a philosophical guy, he was kind of an emotional guy, and he really wanted to outlaw war. And he came up with a speech called the 14 Points, and basically it's a rule book on how to end war for all times, to make the world safe for democracy. No more secret treaties, no more using economic barriers, right? No more haves and have-nots, allowing ethnic groups to have self-determination, creating a League of Nations where everybody could sit down and talk and petition and talk about their grievances, and, if you will, an evolution of political and social society. It was really kind of a cool thing, but he didn't feel the pulse of the country. Men, we were done. After World War I, what do we lose? What do we lose? We lost the flower of our youth. Germany is destroyed. France is in chaos. England has lost a total generation. Country's on the verge of bankruptcy. Russia is gone. It's a mess. So men, we're not going to care about Europe that much anymore. We're going to take care of our own affairs. We got the Roaring '20s coming up, with speakeasies, liberation of women to some degree, alcohol, jazz music, and let's just have a good time and let our hair down. The jazz age, right? We don't care about Europe. We try to do the right thing, and what happened, man? What happened? So we become isolationist. Later, isolationism, minding your own business, will play right into Hitler's hands. All right. The Versailles Treaty was interesting to me, men, because the Germans were not allowed to participate. Only the victors. They were allowed to send a couple of observers, but they were not allowed to even participate. Gentlemen, this is a bad analogy, but it'd be like having a divorce and you're not allowed to have your partner say a word. That's not going to work. So Germany already felt that they were slighted. How can you have a peace treaty determine the future of our people and we're not even allowed to participate? Well, this is, if you get a chance to watch this video, right? Woodrow Wilson, the great romantic, fantastic. This was a really idealistic, caring president. Now, when I was a young man and I was still in college, we were taught that Woodrow Wilson was heartbroken when the League of Nations didn't pass with the Senate, and that shortly after he had a stroke. Now, I don't know if this is folklore or if this is accurate or not, but there were stories that Mrs. Wilson was actually running the White House secretly while the president was in grave physical condition. I truly believe that the League of Nations, its failure to ratify, broke his heart. Another great video about how the map of Europe changed. If you get a chance to take a look at this, it's really informative. YouTube has got it going on. God bless YouTube. In my early days of being a teacher, we had to use chalk in magazines. Yeah, it's come a long way. Now, really quick, this is Lloyd George. He's no dummy. He knew the conditions were unfair. But what do you call a politician who doesn't get reelected? You call him unemployed. So Lloyd George knew that Wilson was right. Yeah, Wilson may be stubborn and he may be idealistic, but if we don't give Germany a chance to recover from this war, and we make them into martyrs, we're going to have kickback, blowback. And that's how the National Socialist Workers' Party, just a ragtag group of malcontents, are going to have a chance to rise to power with a high school dropout by the name of Adolf Hitler. Now, this is George Clemenceau. Some people called him the Tiger Versailles. Men, he wanted not only to blame Germany and have them have the war guilt clause where poor Germany had to pay back all the money that the Allies spent and invested in the war. Now, men, they're not going to be able to pay off this debt until almost, what was it? I'm going to have to look it up. I think they didn't pay off that debt until 4 or 5 or 6 years ago. Clemenceau wanted Germany to be destroyed. He would want to make sure they would never come back. Now, Lloyd George goes along with that because, he knows that Wilson's right. We got to have a fair treaty, but he knows he will not get reelected if there's not a little bit of vengeance in his policy. Now, how come I haven't mentioned Mr. Orlando here of Italy? Because the Italians did not do very well in the fighting. They took heavy casualties, they spent a lot of money, and quite frankly, their performance was subpar, I believe. Orlando and the Italians felt insulted, they felt like they were not treated as equals, and quite frankly, they were going to be disregarded and leave the convention early, so it's a big 3. 2 pragmatists and 1 idealist. And in the end, revenge is going to win out. Now, is it simple revenge or is it diplomacy? Well, Germany lost its Air Force, they lost their Navy, they're only going to be allowed to keep 100,000 troops, which is nothing at all, and they're going to have to pay reparations. There's going to be territorial demands. They're going to lose their colonies, they're going to take part of Germany, they're going to make it into a buffer zone, right? And there's going to be times when France will actually take advantage of Germany's natural resources like coal and iron and really, really, really hamstring the Germans. Now, lads, it's interesting because the United States actually helped to send money to Germany to help pay back France and England for the war reparations. This is right before the Great Depression. And it's kind of funny because America is lending money to Germany, and Germany has to pay America back for not only the loan, but, the war reparations. But, it's smart because without the German economy, Europe is in trouble. Since there is no international police force, there's not much the United States can do. And the American people believe the League of Nations was just going to cause us a lot of troubles. We don't want to go back to the trenches. We're done. We don't want to be the policemen of the world. And so no good deed goes unpunished. And the Weimar Republic is going to become a democratic experience. And quite frankly, men, they're not going to be able to stop the multiple political parties that are going to try to fill the vacuum of Germany now that the forceful Kaiser Wilhelm is gone. And one of those groups are going to be the Bolsheviks, the communists. And they're going to get very, very close to running Germany, and they're going to hold Germany for a while until something known as the Free Corps and the brown shirts will chase them out. But that's going to be in the chapter about Hitler's rise to power. All right. Gentlemen, if you ever get a chance to look at all this, study this, Article 10. Article 10 is one of the most idealistic things imaginable, but most people believe that if we become part of Article 10, that the former president of Princeton University is going to lead us into another war. We cannot be the policemen of the world. Please take time to read this for the test. All right? Senator Henry Cabot Lodge will be the bane of poor President Wilson's existence, and he believes that we will be dragged into ceaseless conflicts if we try to become the policemen of the world. All right, another great movie. Check this out. All right. And finally, if you will, remember this. Without the United States, the League of Nations is a paper tiger. Great political cartoon. And later, we'll take a look at the homework here. And it's really, really tragic that maybe, just maybe, the United States could have helped avoid World War II by becoming more proactive. But I do see why the isolationists did what they did. Men, we'll talk about the Rhineland and the other areas that are going to be used as buffers. We'll talk about the Saar Valley. We'll talk about all this in our next time to get together. But please remember who the big four are. You cannot forget the war guilt clause, and you certainly cannot forget, please do not forget, don't forget this. All right? This is the most important slide. Please know these characters. All right, good luck on the test tomorrow, guys. I'll be thinking about you. If you have any problems, text me, email me, and I'll be happy to teach you or reteach anything or explain anything, because that's what I love doing. Hey, have a great